is first in a 5-session series on what we're calling Startup Secrets, but everything you need to know about starting your company. Led by Michael Skok, who, if you came in the fall, he did a great session as well. He is a serial entrepreneur, turned venture capitalist, and has a passion for this stage of development in a company's life cycle, and it's going to be an amazing series. So I don't want to take up too much time. I'll let Michael introduce the session, but we're really excited. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Jody. So thank you all for coming. I will start with a very informal introduction, which is, about half my lifetime ago, I would have been sitting in the audience, probably trying to figure out what you're trying to figure out, which is how to start a company. And having done it a number of times, I always just wished that somebody would sit down with me and share some of the things that you don't get taught out of a textbook that would have helped along the way. It's hard to ever condense all of those into a series of even 4 or 5 lectures. So what we decided we'd do is try to make this more of a workshop so it's interactive. So do not feel like there's any hold back at all. If you have a question, if some of this doesn't make sense to you, or you have some particular insight that you want to bring to this, that's great. In fact, for me, the best thing I've learned as I got older is that the older I get, the more I have to learn. And the best way to learn for me is to try to teach. So this is a learning experience for me, is the way I would put it. So I'm looking forward to learning from you just as much as hopefully you'll learn something from me. So with that, I have one positioning statement for myself, which is sort of my value prop, if you will. And that's, I like to give my entrepreneurs unfair competitive advantage. So the idea behind this set of sessions is that if we manage to work together well, we'll figure out how to give you some unfair competitive advantage as you go out to start your business. And that's really what the idea behind the Startup Secrets series was. Of course, by the end of this, hopefully none of this will be a secret. And so it'll just be about how to get started. And on that note, this is the series that Jody and I worked out here as to how to break things up. If you want the big picture context of this, at some point you're going to have to put all this together to pitch it if you're going to raise money. And probably even if you're not, you're going to put it in a pitch that's going to be what you sell to customers and so forth. And so on the website that is currently, I would describe it as in beta, Entrecapitalist website, you will find the pitch that was put together for the last session I did at Harvard, which is the perfect pitch. And that actually contains all of this in a pitch form with some notes that are sort of getting behind the startup pitch. How do you put it together? So that'll be big picture context. If you want to get that, that's on the Entrecapitalist site. So that site's in beta. It's just got some basic content up. In fact, we'll launch a proper site in a couple of weeks' time, which is going to keep this content fresh for you. But I have one pleasant surprise for you. You're going to find that I've been a student myself of a great teacher, and his name is Jeffrey Moore. And so I invited Jeffrey to actually join us for a bonus session. And Jeffrey's going to come on May 17th. Which is great news. He's a fabulous speaker. He has some of the best advice that you could wish for in the process of building a company, taking products to market, and so forth. And he'll come for a workshop in May, and it's already, quote unquote, sold out with our own entrepreneurs. But so what we're going to do here is try to find a way to join it with the Harvard program and invite whoever the winners of the various different sessions, and you'll see what winning means later on, to meet with Jeffrey Moore and join for that session on May 17th. And hopefully lots of you will be around, and we'll figure out how to get the bulk of you to attend that. So just to get you started, I'm going to make an obvious observation about the order of this. We felt like starting with company formation would be the wrong thing to do, because if you don't have an idea and a value prop, why start a company? So that's why we put this one first. Needless to say, once you've figured out what you want to do, figuring out how you're going to start building the company comes second. Then business model and go-to-market follow. And then the idea is that you all get a chance to pitch, and as I say, win at that point your own opportunity into working with Jeffrey in a full session. So let's start with a value proposition. What is a value prop? Well, there's a tremendous statement that people always think of, which is, if you've got an incredibly compelling value prop, then it's like having a great mousetrap. Everybody's going to beat a path to your door. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. In the real world, it doesn't matter how great your value prop is, there are a lot of other aspects to it. But it does start with having a value prop that is, hopefully a breakthrough in of itself, and that causes people to say, wow, okay, that's a company I want to engage with, that's a product or service I want to buy, and that obviously starts the ball rolling. So fundamentally, we're going to get into how to define and evaluate and build that. But I have got, as I said, just a few of the answers. And I'm lucky enough to have a lot of great entrepreneurs that I work with, and I brought some along with me tonight. So I'm going to introduce some of those folks who are going to help both in the session and also the workshop. So I want to introduce to you, first of all, Adam Berry. Where is Adam? In the back. If you just want to stand up for a second, Adam. Adam is an EIR at Northbridge and a multi-time serial entrepreneur himself. Very skilled in the marketing area, so will be very helpful to those of you who are trying to figure out things like positioning and messaging. This will be very helpful in putting some of this together. I've also got the team from Aperion. So I just want to have a quick introduction to Alan.
Hello.
And Sim and Carlos.
Hello.
And they're here in force because I'm going to use Aperion as a case study today. It's a relatively new company. We invested in it about a year ago. They're actually doing unbelievably well. They just got preempted in their Series B, which is always a good sign. Beat all of their plans for every quarter since they started and are doing great things. And so you can feel for real what it's like to have gone from 0 to 60, which is what these guys have done in the last year. And we'll bring them in as a case study. But I said breakthrough and breakout as well. And it's tough to find real breakout products that just, change the game. And we love to invest in game changers. So I've also got an entrepreneur with me here, David McFarlane, if you'd like to stand up, who's the co-founder of Akiban. And we'll introduce Akiban in this too. And hopefully some of you will get a chance to talk to David and the other guys here about what they're doing. And there's a real breakthrough that Akiban's bringing to their marketplace, which we'll also introduce this evening. So with that said, let's get started and try to help you figure out how to build a value proposition. We're going to do it in 3 stages. We're going to talk about how to define it, and then how to evaluate it, and then obviously in the real world what you do is probably go off at that point and iterate on it and figure out how to refine it and improve it. But in this world, we're going to do a workshop. We'll break off and have some teams that can actually go off and figure out how to build their value prop, and you can do your own evaluation, hopefully with the tools that I give you this evening. So as the old saying goes, what I'm really trying to do is give you the tools so you can fish for yourselves rather than me having to feed you every time. So that's what the evaluate piece is about. But let's start with the define piece. The first thing that Jody did this evening was a setup. So those of you who raised your hands, I want you to raise them again. Anybody who's got an idea that they'd like to build a value prop around, and ultimately hopefully a business or a startup around, please raise your hand again. Okay, I'm going to pick from, please keep them raised, keep them raised. I need 10 of you. So let's see, 1, 2, if I point at you, just keep your hand up. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Any more? I need 2 more. 9. Over this side, 10. Great, we've got 10 of you. So just remember, at the end of this, I'm going to ask you to come up here and just share in one line what your idea is. So you've got some time to think about what that one line should be. I'm not asking it to be perfect. I just want the idea. It could be as simple as a new widget. Fine. But you've got your idea as a starting point, and then we're going to break into groups and give you a chance to build a value prop around it. So the 10 of you should be thinking about, as I take you through this, how can you get help from the rest of the group that's here in the workshop this evening to build your value prop. So thank you for that. So what is a value prop? I want to start with the end in mind here, and that is basically it's almost a positioning statement. This is sort of a simplified version of, in fact, the Geoffrey Moore positioning statement for a company. And it's defining for whom do you do what uniquely well is probably the best way to simplify it. So this framework, I'll give you it, don't worry, you don't have to write this down, and it'll be on the website, and I'll give you it as a handout this evening, is really all about defining that. And what I'm going to do here is ask Aperion to give you a sense of what their value prop is by challenging them to come up with this in real time for me. So, Sim, who is our target customer at Aperion?
Businesses.
Businesses, big, small? Are they enterprises or are they?
Medium to big, I would say.
Medium to big, okay.
Not SMB.
Okay, not SMB. I might simplify that.
S maybe.
Okay. Are they any kind of business, or do they have to have a particular profile? Like, are they social? Are they mobile? Are they local? Are they retail?
They're
Are they
businesses that have employees who use mobile devices or tablets.
Okay,
Which is
good.
now becoming just about every business.
Okay. So we might say they're mobile, large businesses or enterprises. What is it that they're dissatisfied with right now?
They're dissatisfied with the process of figuring out what applications they should have for their employees, how to build them, how to manage and distribute them.
Okay, so there's a bunch of value props in there. What's the one thing, for example, that they just can't do right now? Can they get their apps to these employees if they've built them?
The biggest pain point is the distribution and management of those apps.
So how many people have mobile phones? I'm assuming everybody, but well, let's say who doesn't, because it's a much easier question. Good. There's only one person who doesn't. We need to help out. So you probably know this. I mean, if you have an iPhone, for example, you just go to iTunes and you can download an app very easily. Why can't you do that with an enterprise?
Because if you build an app for an enterprise, it's not on the iTunes store.
Okay.
That's the first problem.
So those are consumer apps principally.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're trying to help enterprises who are having a problem getting their apps distributed. Is that the idea?
And manage the life cycle. It's more than that one time.
Okay. So I'll take one of those value props to start off with, because there's a lot there. And what is our product? What do we do?
We have a platform. We have I guess you could call it a product, but it's delivered as a service, software as a service.
Okay. But what does it do? Like if I'm an enterprise, what is this product called? What does it do for me?
It's called EASE, and it stands for Enterprise Application Services Environment, which is a mouthful. But it is primarily an enterprise app store for the user and for the IT people a way to manage things.
I'll take Enterprise App Store.
I hate that term, but that's what everybody calls it.
It's interesting, though. You see how challenging this is. And I'm having a dialogue with somebody who's really good, by the way. He's actually won awards for the way he presents. It's just challenging to get across what you do uniquely well for who in a short space of time. And yet oftentimes you'll find that that's about as much time as you'll get as, the classic thing is in an elevator, between floors, you've got to give somebody your elevator pitch. So we've got the first couple of things. So for mobile enterprises who are trying to get apps to their users, we've got an enterprise app store. Okay. What does it provide? What key problem does it solve?
It solves the problem of we're reformulating this right now, actually, in the company.
So this is a real workshop for you.
Yeah, it is. We're reformulating, say, really engaging the employees to be more productive.
Okay. I think that's a very empowering thing to say, but I will come back and see whether I've got this right myself in a second. What is it that the enterprise IT organizations are afraid of? Do they worry about security, or is that irrelevant?
Oh, they absolutely worry about security.
Is that one of the top 1, 2, or 3 things?
The IT guys is probably number 1 or 2.
Okay, so security is an issue. And then there are lots of alternative solutions in pretty much every market. Is that true in our market?
Absolutely.
What's the category of other solutions or alternatives?
Do it yourself.
Yep.
IT guys say, I can build something on a website myself. There are solutions called mobile device management solutions, and then there's our category, which we kind of created.
Okay. I'm going to capture do it yourself because I didn't think of that when I was preparing this, but it's a big part of what comes into the market in pretty much every technology situation. So is there a category that other people typically put around what the alternatives are?
Mobile device management is the category.
Okay. So
mobile management, there's lots of acronyms, usually Gartner creates them, but yeah, that's one.
do we like that category?
We hate that category.
Why is that?
Because it puts us in a corner. We want to position against that category, but it's been established over the last couple of years as the name of this category.
Okay, but do enterprises like it?
I don't know if they like it or not. It's just that's what they've been told.
Okay. So we're running into very typical dialogue that goes on all the time, by the way. I run into this as an investor too, which is there are lots of alternatives. People will try to make theirs sound better than the other one. In the end, you're going to have to come up with a statement that says why we are uniquely able to solve a problem. Otherwise, we'll get into a constant challenge about what are you slightly better, or are you a little bit better here, or you whatever. So I'm going to just reveal what I wrote. I purposely did not tell these guys, that's for real. What I wrote was their value prop. And you can see I've been leading the witness a little bit here, I admit. But let's see how I did. I said for mobile enterprises, so you were saying large companies, I think we drew the mobile word out because that's critical, who are unable to deliver apps to their users. And those users are bringing their own devices to work, which is really the shift that's happened in the marketplace. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay. Because in the old world, corporations, enterprises gave out BlackBerrys and things like that and said, we own this device, so therefore we're going to control it, we're going to lock it down. Okay, that's a big shift to what's actually happened. Since the iPhone and the iPad came out, people bring their own, basically. And there's this whole trend that It's called BYOD. So for mobile enterprises who are unable to deliver apps to users who are bringing their own devices in, because they don't control them anymore, our, you gave me the words, Enterprise App Store, which is an enterprise version of iTunes, think of it that way, provides for users to securely, and this is the key word, it is the number one thing that IT is worried about. They're worried about when you bring your own device in, that something on there is insecure about it. You might bring viruses in, or you may have it hacked. You may not even know that. And to access those apps and their information that they have, because if it's not secure and you're bringing in those devices, obviously corporate information could leak out. So they're really worried about this. And I actually knew this before I ever approached Aperion, because we'd done a lot of work to come up with a mobile thesis. But here comes the killer statement, and it's really important. We'll try to figure out how to help you get that in actually the go-to-market session rather than today. You really want to end up with something that says, unlike everybody else, we do something uniquely well. So this is, unlike MDM, I don't expect anybody here to know what MDM is, so I'll just explain it simply. It's basically a way of locking down the device. And that's the way people controlled the devices that enterprises used before. Our patented, and I get a little technical here, cloud-based, come back to why that's important in a minute, MAM, and that's a new category that we're creating, won't get into that either, but just think of it as solution, is instantly turned on and scales to tens of thousands of users. So now I'm going to go back and challenge you. Why is that last thing important? Why is the unlike important?
Well, it's not just scales, but quickly and easily. I mean, qualifiers. I think that scaling quickly and easily is a real challenge with the alternatives.
Okay.
And that's, I think, one of the biggest reasons why people have used and adopted our solution, because they realize that whole ease of implementation is so critical to companies.
So can I take an example from you? Alan, can you pick any customer that has thrown out or said, no, MDM isn't going to work, the alternatives aren't going to work because it doesn't scale? Can you give me an example of any of those?
Yeah, absolutely. We have one customer in particular who's quite heavily invested in MDM already, found that...
Can I get you, just in case people can't hear on this side, stand up and just project that way?
Yeah, I can think of one customer right off the top of my head, shall remain nameless, anonymity reasons, but anyway, they are Fortune 1000 customers who had been heavily invested in mobile device management. They'd spent an awful lot of that infrastructure, ripped it out for two reasons. Number one, it was too costly for them at the margin to get more devices rolled out. We, for this value statement, could light up thousands of users instantaneously. They had to go in very small chunks. At each chunk, there was more infrastructure they had to pay for, and there was time to deploy.
So because we were in the cloud, we basically just can turn them on.
Yeah, we are instantly elastic.
Is there anything to install?
Nothing to install.
Great. So I can tell you that when we were doing our investment thesis, it was just fundamental. People either had to go spend tens of thousands of dollars, install a lot of infrastructure, take an awful lot of time over doing it, and they were forcing users to lock down devices, none of which was what users wanted. And they couldn't scale out at any pace. And I'm not going to be as reticent to name the customer as you are. It was Cisco. And they were struggling to get their sales force productive with things as fundamental as, and this is where the information piece comes in, their price lists, which need to be kept up to date, and their latest product information. And so there was a very real consequence here, which is that you didn't have salespeople empowered with the right information to go sell their products, bring in the top line, and even in some cases, they were selling the wrong product at the wrong price. That's a problem. Now, if you've got something that literally will take your value proposition all the way down to, we can uniquely serve a customer like Cisco by delivering something that affects their top line and empowers them to, actually solve that problem really very, very in a very compelling way, you're going to have a business. And so that's really all this exercise was designed to do. So thank you, the Aperion guys, for having me heckle with you here. This is not perfect. Actually, I purposely forced myself to do it separately to them. But the point should be, whatever your value prop is, these key elements should come into it. So we're going to be working towards this tonight. When you go off for your workshop, this is the template I'm going to ask you to fill in, and I'll give it to you, so don't worry. But how do we build it? And how do people find it? Well, it's really not that difficult. First of all, you obviously want to start with a problem. You want to understand, what is this problem out there, often referred to as a need or pain or other challenge that people are addressing. But should it be any kind of problem? No. And this is where I want to give you some of the insight that I've gained from doing this for 30 years, 20 years as a CEO trying to build these things, and then 10 years as a VC watching people succeed when they get this right. And you'll find that I'm a lousy student myself, so I had to come up with mnemonics for everything. So I couldn't remember everything that I was ever taught unless I came up with some way of having mnemonics for it. So all the way through my pitch, I'm going to try to give you mnemonics, which doesn't make it terribly difficult to remember these things, but hopefully this will be the first of them. These are 4 U's. You need to learn 4 U's to figure out a problem. Find a problem that's unworkable, first of all. Find one that is unavoidable, so it's not a nice to have. Find something that is really urgent, and then most importantly, probably that's underserved. Obviously, if there are thousands of people solving this problem, that's not a great place to start. Now, having said that, each of these things has aspects that I want you to understand. So another mnemonic for you. Is it black? I actually borrowed from some great thinking that Adam was doing for me on the whiteboard when we were going through this. And he made a great point, which is there are lots of different types of needs. So is the need or problem that you're trying to solve black? What the hell do I mean by that? Well, let's put it on a diagram. Everybody always likes 2x2s at Harvard, so I had to come up with one. The bottom left is a latent aspirational need. Adam, I'm going to call on you for this because you had such a great example of it. We've been talking about mobile, so what's an example in the mobile world of a latent aspirational need?
Can I give the long answer? Slightly long. So when people talk about needs, like you hear this all the time, oh, you have to go out, you ask your customers, what do they need? You know, and then they'll tell you what they need, and then you go build it, and you sell, and you make a lot of money, and you become filthy rich, and all that. You buy an island in the Caribbean, all that kind of stuff. But short of the island in the Caribbean, it turns out that when you ask people their needs, they only give you a thin slice of that. They give you the needs that they know they have. That's not particularly interesting. It might be helpful, it might be valuable. It might be helpful if you're trying to go from version 5 to version 6. But where you get the really exciting innovations is when you discover latent needs. Needs that people have, but they don't really articulate them in a clear way. So the classic example of this, I think, or a good one, is the iPhone. So if you ask Steve Jobs, did he do any market research? He said, no, I don't have to do any market research. But does he have a profound understanding of latent needs for consumers? Yes. So if you ask people, do you need a computer in your pocket that will help you find where you are, tell you what restaurants to go to, let you send a picture to your girlfriend, and also play a game with sort of silly birds and pigs? People go, no, I don't really need one of those. Like, computer in my pocket, haven't heard of that, doesn't sound useful. But if you watch people, you think about people, you go, well, are they lost? Yeah, they're lost. They may not be thinking, I really need a handheld thing to find where I am. You know, do they need to find restaurants? Yeah. Do they get bored? Do they want to be entertained while they're on the road? Yeah, that happens. They like to send stuff to their friends. Well, that happens too. So those are all, in a sense, latent needs. They're not, people aren't expressing those as like, wow, that's a big burning problem I have right now. But if you notice that that's what's happening to them, then you can start to think creatively about really compelling solutions to those needs, to those problems that they face.
Thank you. So I think it's a fabulous example because none of us could have probably put a need out there and defined what became obviously, a world-dominating product. For those of you who didn't hear the numbers, 37 million iPhones last quarter alone, which put Apple at the #1 smartphone position in the world. That was not something that came out of somebody saying, exactly as Adam said, oh, I've got a pain or a need that I can identify that I've got to immediately have a product for. So this is a challenging thing. However, I'm actually not going to try to solve that problem for you by getting you to think about latent or aspirational needs like iPhones. That's a really hard thing to do. And for every Steve Jobs, there are thousands of entrepreneurs that unfortunately don't make it into the Hall of Fame. And part of the reason why is that they find it difficult to really define whether a need is actually something that you could take an aspirin for versus what you really need, which is something so painful that people need either antibiotics or morphine or whatever it is to get through the pain. And that's what I'm looking for. So I will just describe this as we're looking in today's presentation for needs that are blatant and critical, meaning they're absolutely immediately obvious to people, and they are so, and that's the blatant piece, and they're critical in that if you literally can't solve this problem, something's going to go wrong as a consequence to it. Yes?
Would, say, knowing whether the girl you have a crush on, whether she is single, would that be a blatant critical need as Facebook saw?
I love this. Crush. We're going to capture that a little later on. I think that could be a critical need. Feels like it to me. I'm married and I'm happily married, so I'm definitely not going to get drawn into the conversation too far. But it falls into a category of consumer needs that's very high. It turns out, if you go to a few pages forward in my presentation, you'll see that it comes out #1 on the needs list. So thanks for
undergrad, it does.
Absolutely. So with that said, we're going to keep that, and I'm going to come back to it. But yeah, for some people, that's going to be considered a blatant critical need. So, and we'll see why later on. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for these blatant critical needs like we've just described over here. In the business world, it's going to be something as simple as a broken business problem. So it might be a mission-critical process that is broken. I actually gave you an example of one that's not quite mission-critical, but it's pretty close, which is imagine being a large enterprise company like Cisco that's got tens of thousands of salespeople out there, and they're getting the wrong prices, and they haven't got the latest product information, and therefore they're not serving their customer right. They may be losing competitive bids and so forth because of that. That's not necessarily mission critical, but it's certainly a broken business problem if you can't have salespeople productively selling for you. That is true, by the way, of pharma companies. It's true of insurance companies. It's true of pretty much anybody in the enterprise world that has a sales force, is that they need the latest information to train their salespeople and to have them effective. So the mobile case study of Aperion is an interesting one when we go down one step further, and we'll talk about that with another example in a moment, because they are very much seeing that as a typical customer example. So we've got lots and lots of customers asking for that same business problem to be solved. How can you give me something that immediately makes my sales force more effective? So if I may, I'm going to just pause here for a second and check in and say, do people get what I mean by a broken business problem? Or are there any questions? No, you have a good sense of that. Good. Okay. It's pretty important because you can find lots of problems, but if they really are going to be critical, something's broken. There's a flow that's broken, or there's something that's fundamentally not working in the business. How do you check that? Much harder. Anybody got any ideas about how you might check whether something is broken? Yeah.
From an outside view?
Yeah. Or even inside the business.
If you're a customer, I guess.
If you're a customer.
Sure.
That's a great example. Have you ever had problems with the company's customer service? Yeah. Any examples of it? Anybody in the room?
Verizon.
Yeah, Verizon. And I'll bet you there's a broken business process behind that. Somewhere along the line they don't know their customer. They haven't figured out what your need is. They really basically aren't connecting the dots between, for example, how much they're billing you and what you signed up for. There'll be something in there that's broken. And customer service is a classic one. So the easy question to ask is, what are the consequences? If there are consequences like you've got an unhappy customer who decides to switch from Verizon to AT&T, that's painful. That costs you money. That costs you and has serious consequences in terms of everything from the top line all the way through to your standings in the industry.
But
Question?
doesn't the client have to perceive this? In the case of Verizon or so many other, they either don't get it or they're willing to simply put it in their cost model. So unless the client perceives it as a problem, who cares if it's broken?
Well said. Very well said. That's in the blatant versus latent. If they don't perceive it, it's in the latent category. And you've got a challenge, which you've got to get them to understand it. Now, there's all sorts of selling techniques that help people understand latent needs. But you're much better off if they already know it. So I'll give you an example from my portfolio that is interesting. In exactly that, since you brought up Verizon, it's not actually them. It's AT&T. So AT&T's customer handling is a tremendous challenge when they want to bring a new customer on. And there's an enormous amount of process associated with that. And so this company, Active Endpoints, built an entire process using what in effect is a tool to model the process and ensure that it's very smooth, that it doesn't break, and that all the way along the line you can measure how long does it take from somebody, for example, picking up the phone to customer service to getting their new account set up. And they measure that whole flow all the way through, and they can see all the way through that flow whether the customer is being served correctly. And indeed, they can measure not only whether they're being served correctly, but whether they return later on, how they come back into the system with what problems and where they go and so forth. So there's a lot of detail in it. But to give you a sense of, that was a latent need. It became blatant when the iPhone took off because they couldn't sign customers up fast enough. So oftentimes things that start latent become blatant because of some market changing condition, et cetera. And if you're in the right place at the right time, like Active Endpoints was, that turned into a several $1 million order. And this is for a company, by the way, that doesn't have any outside salespeople. So obviously, needless to say, a very profitable customer for them. And it's being repeated with other customers coming through in that same way. So anyway, to summarize this, you want to find something that's broken, and you want to see test that it's broken by figuring out, are there really significant consequences? And if they're not, if it's like, well, people get pissed off, but they'll kind of live with it, maybe that's not a big conference. But if you're actually losing customers, you're losing revenue, or you're losing to the competition, or you're failing to, for example, succeed in entering some new marketplace, probably that's a significant enough consequence. Okay, so that's the first view. The second one is unavoidable. So I've given 2 examples of unavoidable things here. Whether we like it or not, death and taxes are part of life. One step back from that, if you're in business, you have to account for everything. It's not an option. If you're in business, you have to account for your business. Simple as that. So it's an unavoidable need. It means whether you decide to do it on Excel or in QuickBooks or whatever you decide to do, you have to do it, because otherwise you will get shut down. That's an unavoidable need. Great place to be, therefore, because you're always going to find business there. What's another example? I've put up regulation here. It's not a very exciting one because people don't get up in the morning to be regulated. They just have to deal with the regulations. But it's a very real one. And so, I'm sure all of you can think of regulations, but in the business world, there are increasingly challenges for people to operate around regulations, by which I mean not avoid them. They have to work within them, but they have to obviously maintain operations in a very fluid sense. And so it's something that you could do very manually, but if you can automate your compliance, is the key word here, then it's a very profitable business. So I'm going to give you an example of this. Look them up on the web if you're interested in more detail on this. One of our companies is a company called Reval, R-E-V-A-L. And it's a company that manages and accounts for, so the first thing, derivatives. What the hell are derivatives? Well, you don't need to get into this in too much detail to realize where it becomes important. If you're a big company and you trade all over the world, you will trade in multiple currencies. And unfortunately, if you're the typical company, you will only have one exchange, for example, the NYSE or the NASDAQ that you trade on, and so you have to report everything in dollars. And if you're finding exchange variations, like there have been in the last couple of years, are going up and down like crazy, so you're selling in France, for example, and suddenly the euro collapses because of the European crisis, or worse still in Greece, then you obviously don't want to take risk on that. And so you buy currencies forward, and oftentimes you do it as an option or a derivative. And those kinds of trades help you to offset the risk of things like your currency going crazy. Now, what happens if you get that risk wrong? Obviously, it could be very expensive. What happens if you don't account for it right? So you've actually bought a bunch of things that are forward options to protect you, and you miscalculate how you're actually taking risk on. It turns out you'll get into trouble with your accounting, and you'll end up actually against the regulations, a series of regulations, and you'll end up getting into a very difficult situation. So it turns out all Fortune 1000 companies have to deal with that problem. Turns out the way they deal with it is on Excel, largely. It also turns out that since Reval got into this business, there have been some really painful consequences for companies. So GE had a restatement in 2005 that was $343 million just from derivatives accounting being wrong. That suddenly became a blatant critical need for them. So the light bulb went on for these guys, and they founded a company which has continued to solve that problem in a very automated way. It doesn't use spreadsheets. It's actually a nice, simple solution to this. And it turns out they've now discovered that 94% of the global 500 use derivatives, and it's an extremely profitable business. That I can't tell you too much about them because they're getting ready to go public. But just by the very fact that that's happened in the last few years tells you that turned out to be a great business. A real unavoidable need with major consequences just around accounting and regulation. So you'll find plenty of those. But now here's the next challenge. Let's say you found a blatant critical need. Is it the only need the company has? Unlikely. Or is it the only need the consumer has? I doubt the only thing you could consist on is love. So even though we all might feel that sometimes, there are always other needs, whether they're consumer needs or they're business needs. And so the challenge is to figure out, relative to other needs, what is the priority of what you're putting forward as a value prop. And honestly, if you're number 3, you might get a consideration. But if you're not in the top 3, I would almost invariably say you're unlikely to get considered in any kind of reasonable cycle. And so obviously what you want to be is number 1. And if you can identify very quickly where those priorities are and how you're going to be number one. You're going to set yourself up for success with your value prop. Okay, that brings me to the fourth and final U, and that's underserved. And I've split this purposely into business and into consumer. On the business side, it's so different to consumer. I'm largely focused on B2B stuff. I did some consumer stuff when I was working with Symantec and getting them going, and I loved it. It was a lot of fun, but it's very different. And I'm very respectful of it. In fact, in our partnership, we have people who are much younger and much smarter than me at understanding how the consumer is evolving, because it's even generationally different, as you all know. Thinking about Gen X, Gen Y, and comparing that to, for example, the boomers. So in business, I would simplify things and say you really want to be able to focus on how you get to understand when a business has finite resources, and that's always dollars, time, people, and attention. And oftentimes attention is the big challenge, because literally just getting their attention as a startup is tough. And so you've got to figure out, how are you going to get their attention? What is it that is going to get them to commit dollars, time, and people to you? And if you've done all the other 3 U's that I just described to you, there's a chance you'll get their attention, because you've identified a really critical problem that's broken for them that they see as really urgent. So hopefully you're approaching everything right. But even then, I can tell you the number of times companies get stuck in the process of getting the company to commit resources to actually trying to fix the problem is huge. So I brought David here for a reason, because I walked out of his board meeting on Friday and I heard that 3 times. So David, could you give us one example of, maybe, for example, if you don't mind me mentioning the company that came into the board meeting, Name Media. What problem did we solve for them, and then how long has it taken since they realized we could solve it to actually get them to do something?
So, give a little bit of context of what we do, so you can have that. So, at Keaton Technologies, we basically have developed a next-generation relational database that allows us to run SQL applications 10 to 100 times faster. So, it's a huge impact in terms of scaling and performance for your application. In the case of Name Media,
pause for a second. Somebody over here didn't hear.
No, if you can speak a bit louder, perhaps.
Okay. So at Keaton Technologies, we've created a next-generation relational database that allows us to scale SQL applications and run SQL queries 10 to 100 times faster. So it has a big impact in terms of problem areas for these application developers, and you can do it without actually having to rewrite any of your application. So in this particular case, Name Media, the problem that they had is that they would have these peaks of poor performance. So people would come to their website, they sell media namespace, and it might take 15 seconds for them to actually get a response or a transaction. That kills you. You're dead. It's over. You lose your customer completely when that happens. And so what we've been able to do is to take those queries that were running in 9 seconds, we run them in 60 milliseconds, we eliminate the problem altogether. So it's been extremely impressive. But it has still taken them 2 months before they've been able to move this forward. Just because of all the different things and hoops that they have to jump through QA, staging, and everything else, this is their primary asset.
But have they given you the time and the attention that you need, and are they putting dollars behind now, actually working with you to put the problem into the solution into production?
Yes, so I mean, our situation is that we're very early stage. We're not even actually fully declared GA, but they are putting us into production even before we go GA. That's how urgent the problem is to them. But don't underestimate all the hurdles that you still got to get through production.
Thank you, David. So we'll come back to that in a minute, because obviously you heard 10 to 100 times, which is the kinds of breakthroughs we're looking for. You also heard some interesting things about the kind of problems we can solve. The most interesting thing I actually heard in the board meeting was as follows, which is that Name Media said, if you solve this problem for us, and I quote, it will double our revenue. So there was a downside, which is if you don't solve it, we're going to lose customers. And if you do solve it, there's an upside that's we're going to double our revenue. So there were a lot of good things going, and yet it's still taken them 2 months. You'd think if a company heard they could double their revenue, they'd just jump on it. But this is the reality of what you're dealing with when you have large enterprises. And it's amazingly true to say that very rarely this has anything to do with technology. It's got an enormous amount to do with things like internal politics or just the process by which you have to go through staging and QA and everything else to get into production. It's a great question, though, because every audience has a different reason why they will value something. So I'm not going to get into it tonight, but one of the most important things you're going to hear when we get to the go-to-market session is segmenting and defining who your audience is. And so, okay, so that was the business side. Finally, we're going to get to talking about your love life, which you've been very patient about. Your love life is actually not a surprise to me at all, because everybody who's studied any of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs will tell you that social, security, physical, blah, blah, blah. Social's up the top. We all have these fundamental needs. And it's actually why social is such a big investment area right now. I mean, it's not an accident that Facebook is the phenomenon it is. Because guess what? We all need to find people, connect with them, communicate them, meet them, share them, entertain them, and guess what? Date them, hopefully. So it's not a surprise. And in fact, if you really are good in the consumer world, you can almost invariably rate people's need on the same kind of basis that I was just describing in a business world. So this is very, very much the reason why you see the first uses of the internet as being social, and why dating sites were so successful, and why, obviously, in many instances, social networking sites are successful. And it's also interesting to look at the relative success of things like LinkedIn versus Facebook. LinkedIn's doing well, but it's not doing anywhere near as well as Facebook, because in a social setting, business people want to connect, but it doesn't feel like anywhere near as strong a need as people wanting to connect, meet, date, and so forth. So that's relatively speaking the same basis that I would say to you should evaluate your value prop if you're going after consumers, is figure out, again, all the things I just went through. Is it at the top of the list? How is it prioritized? Is it, for example, critical, or is it just nice? Is it latent or blatant, as we were talking about? And again, just to summarize this, even in the consumer world, you could use these same 4 U's and you'd find they'd all work for you. Have they got some unworkable problem? Is it literally impossible to connect with somebody because they're in a different country? If you're selling a social application, are you solving that problem? It's just unworkable. There's no way to do it. That's why Skype took off. It's why, if you think about a lot of the services that have played out, it's because people, for example, in the underdeveloped countries didn't even have internet. And so when mobile came along, that became their path to connect and to do commerce and many other things. Is it unavoidable? So that's where we talked about things like regulation and accounting. Is it urgent? Can it really be prioritized at the top of the list? And then is it underserved? So hopefully the 4 U's will be easy for you to remember. As I said, these mnemonics are just because I was a poor student who had to find ways to remember things. Hopefully they work for you. All right, in our agenda, we're making good progress. We're still in the define stage. We've hopefully at this point given you a sense of how to define the problem, really understand it, and indeed characterize it with the 4 U's. But now what's the solution? Well, most people think about their solution first. When I see entrepreneurs, the biggest challenge I have is they'll walk in and say, oh, I've got this breakthrough idea. But they haven't really thought about the solution. So I purposely put it second. And also, I would encourage you to always put it second, too. If you can't describe the needs really well or the problem really well to start off with, I think you're going to struggle to come up with a really compelling solution. Nevertheless, when you do, obviously, what you want to be able to do is define it as a compelling breakthrough, something that just feels like David stood up with passion and described, that he's clearly viewing as a breakthrough. And I'm going to try to help you understand, what does that mean? What is a compelling breakthrough? What makes it compelling? What makes it a breakthrough? There are 3 Ds. Back to my mnemonics. Nice and easy. Discontinuous, disruptive, and defensible. I could come up with a bunch more if I wanted to get going, but these are really the most important ones. Discontinuous innovation is incredibly important because what people typically do is think about problems in terms of how will they actually evolve a business in a very obvious way, which is how will they make things a little bit faster, a little bit cheaper, a little bit better. To be honest with you, that has really very little appeal to me as an investor. Marginal improvements in things are very difficult to invest in because you've always got competitors because they're existing markets, and you've always got comparisons, which are therefore inevitably something that somebody else can come and improve to catch up with you on. But if you come up with something that's a completely discontinuous innovation, and an example would be Akiba, and that's why I brought them here tonight. They came up with a way to actually join data, to organize data in a way that literally had never been done before, and they patented it. The word for it is orthogonal. There's never been an orthogonal database before. That word was invented by these guys. But it turns out it really works. It causes people to be able to access their information 10 to 100 times faster, and that's without changing anything. That's a discontinuous innovation. That's a fundamental disruption. What are some other examples of that? Well, I'm going to change completely in sphere just to give you a thought about it. Energy is a major need in the world. I think we all realize that. We also know that the major energy source we all have is oil. We also know that the challenge, if you go down a little bit, of oil is actually getting to it. Turns out the challenge there is drilling. Turns out at a certain point in time, even diamonds aren't hard enough to drill through certain types of rock. And so we have a company, believe it or not, that we invested in that uses lasers to drill. That's a discontinuous innovation. It turns out you can go miles deeper. You can also turn corners to actually go down through substrates and along to get to new oil fields. And that's a big disruption, too. It means that we can go after oil that you just couldn't even tap before. So clearly, we paid attention to that, and we decided to invest in it. And it's a great company. It's called Foro, if you want to look up, F-O-R-O. But there are also discontinuous innovations that happen in business models, not just technology. And probably you use one every day without thinking about it, Google. Google was a discontinuous innovation, except just it was around the business model. They basically said, we're going to give software away free, but we're going to charge for advertising around search and applications, et cetera. So that's the third thing I put on here, not just because it's not in any particular order, but because it's very rarely something people think about. Turns out there are lots of disruptive business models. We have a session on that later, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But I will take you through a series of business models that are disruptive. And it includes things like open source and crowdsourcing and many other things. So those of you who are staying for multiple sessions, you'll get to hear about that. The last one I have on here is defensible technology. Databases, since we've started there, have been around for a long time. So David, why do we think we've got something that's defensible? Stand up, yeah.
It's a unique innovation that you have to completely change the way that the entire database works from top to bottom in order to take advantage of that. So it's unique, it's patented, and it's extremely difficult for any of the other vendors to change their existing technology and business models.
So thank you very much. David's a great entrepreneur, by the way. And if you get even a slight chance to talk to him this evening, you'll find out he can give you a lot more than that. What I was struck by, which was really huge, was the fact that in technology, almost invariably, just like, to use a crass and simple example in architecture, if you have to change the architectural foundations of a product, it's very hard to come and compete with somebody. So it turns out that if you're in the existing database business, you literally would have to rewrite your database to come and compete with Akeban. You'd have to change your entire architecture to come and play in their game. And since they've patented it, which is a smart thing to obviously do, and they're continuing to build innovation on it, there's a good chance they'll be in a very defensible spot. And it's just like architecture. I mean, obviously, if you built a building on a foundation that was meant for 2 stories, and suddenly somebody says, well, I need 3 stories, actually, I need 5, actually, I need an elevator, oh, actually, by the way, I need, you get my point. It's very difficult to do. And that's what's happened with data. Data went from people talking about large data as gigabytes and maybe terabytes to now zettabytes. It's just orders of magnitude more data out there, and they need much greater access to it at much faster speed. So the problem's changed, the architecture's changed, the approach has changed, they patented it, becomes defensible. That's the kind of thing we like to invest in. And when you think about your ideas and building a value proposition, try to figure out what is it going to be that's defensible. And I can tell you right now that coming up with faster, cheaper, better is not defensible. It's what you obviously want as a benefit, but if you can only describe it as faster, cheaper, better, it ain't going to cut it. You've got to be able to define it as uniquely able to solve a problem in a way that nobody else can find an approach to without perhaps rebuilding from scratch or reapproaching it. But again, just to reemphasize this, there's a simple mnemonic which I'd say is think through the 3 Ds of discontinuous, defensible, and disruptive with your approach. I'm sure you'll come up with all sorts of other ones like differentiated and God knows what else, but I hope that's a good start. Yeah, good question.
I had a question. You said faster, cheaper, and better. I understood how faster and cheaper is different than what you have described just now, but I'm not understanding how better is different.
Well, I guess what I'm really saying is faster, cheaper, better are all things you might use as descriptors, but it isn't enough to make it a real compelling breakthrough of a solution. So David could have stood up and said, I'd have been embarrassed if he did, but he could have stood up and said, Akeban has a faster, cheaper, better database. And I would guess that a lot of you would have walked out and gone, why did Michael invest in him? Because it is actually true. All of those things are true. But it wasn't enough for me to say, wow, that's compelling. And it's compelling because it's differentiated, defensible, and it disrupts the market. It's discontinuous in that regard. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. But better is obviously a statement that you want. It's just not enough. Go ahead.
In social media, how are those ideas defensible? Can you have bans on something like Facebook? Is Facebook defensible?
You know, I actually used to struggle with that myself. But I'm beginning to realize that, like a lot of things, if you think hard enough about it, it probably is defensible. But for different reasons. And this is why I really think it's important in our business not to make assumptions. And so I never go to our digital media team and say, you know, hey, why is this defensible from a technology standpoint? I rather try to understand the business. And what I've learned about their business is defensibility comes from different things. For example, it comes from the network effect. It comes from your ability to collect the data on people and be able to use that data. It also comes from things like your business model, which in their case, again, is advertising supported. And so here's what I think probably if you were to look at social networks or social media, you're going to find. You're going to find that the people that are winning, and we could take Facebook as an example, have figured out how to capture some network effect. And obviously, there's an extraordinarily viral effect when people send you something and you want to you know, see the photo that they took of you and you've been tagged in it. You have to go sign up to, you know, to get to see it. And that's kind of a natural need we all have, which is like, oh, somebody tagged me. I need to find out, you know, what was I tagged in. So that network effect very quickly becomes ultimately a social graph. If you have the social graph and somebody else sets up a new site and says, hey, me too, I've got a way you can share your photos, but nobody is on that network. It's kind of like, okay, who are you sharing them with? You can share them with 800 million people over here with absolutely no work, or you've got to invite 800 million people over here. Well, that's a pretty big barrier. So I think there are things that are going to play out in the social world just as strongly, but there'll be things like the social graph or the data you have on people or the connections and so forth. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. Any questions before I move on? Yep.
Coming from an entertainment background, if any movie, any piece of intellectual property in your college entertainment has to be discontinuous.
Yep.
But at the same time, if it doesn't follow story structure, if it doesn't have the chipmunks Alvin comes with, if it doesn't have, your Marlon Brando or whoever is around, it can't. To what extent can something be called continuous, which it has to be a successful movie, a successful company, a successful whatever, and to what extent can it be discontinuous? Where's the gray area between experimental and industry?
That's another fabulous question. So I'm not an entertainment expert, but I'll give you my take on this again from sort of observing what we see in the relative influence of technology in entertainment. Entertainment has lots of reasons why people obviously follow it, and it's entirely dependent on who the demographic is. But if you look at sort of broad entertainment, people obviously get hooked into entertainment with things like serials. Soap operas. Trying to think of the American terms for these things, but they're called serials in England. Soap operas is probably the term here. And because they get to know the characters and they get to know the story and they get hooked into it.
Network shows.
Network shows. There you go. So that's a very natural, continuous thing for entertainment. But then suddenly somebody comes along with something called reality TV. Where did that come from? Nobody had ever thought of that. That was a totally, in my view, discontinuous innovation. And you didn't know it was going to be entertaining, and maybe it isn't actually sometimes. There's some question marks about that, but we won't go there. I would describe that as a discontinuous innovation, and it's changed TV, that's for sure. And it's brought a whole new industry with it. If you look at what I would say is, therefore, the example for us to draw out of that, it's that there are still things that you can find that maybe that was a latent need that would fall into that category, that we all had to sort of see ourselves in our real world. That just hadn't been, met before. But the minute it was there, everybody went, "Wow, that's actually really interesting."
But it's a long way from Survivor to Real Housewives of New York. I mean, they're both reality TV, but
that's different audiences, though. That's the point about entertainment.
That's my point. Is that they're it's both entertainment, but it's.
Well, we are going to get to this not tonight, but in a future session, which is you always have to figure out who's your audience when you're thinking about a need, because it's very difficult to find a need that is so universal that one format, for example, entertainment, is going to work for everybody. That's why we have dozens of channels, too many in my opinion, and dozens of shows. But anyway, that's hopefully giving you a sense of it for the entertainment world. Okay, I want to keep us on track because we're getting to the point where I need to get you involved in doing your own workshop. This is the one thing I want to point out about the way I approach things, at least, which is, simply put, if you're going to pick a fight, pick a big one. Because it's just as much work to build a small company as it is a big one. So why not find a problem that is really difficult and that is really compelling to go after. And that's how we think about things at Northbridge. We talk about this as game changers, and we're very specific about that. For us, it means it's got to be a big enough idea that probably has a $1 billion market behind it. It has complex development, not just a simple minimal viable product that you could get to market in 5 weeks. Not to say that couldn't be a great starting point, but we really like complex problems. We're willing to invest in companies that take, many times, years to build a product. I'll give you an example which will bring this to life for you. When mobile phones took off, sticking with that theme, what happened was everybody thought, oh, voice traffic's going to go up. Yeah, voice traffic did go up. What really took off, certainly with the smartphone, was data traffic. And a very smart entrepreneur we backed actually multiple times decided that that was going to be such a big problem that you'd need to change the network to support all that data traffic. And he started a company called Starent. Starent built huge, thumping, heavy, great boxes that sit in networks that you'll never see in places like Verizon and AT&T and Vodafone all over the world to carry that data traffic. It took them 2 years to get their first product really working and to marketplace. And by the way, the carriers then took, in many instances, months and even years to actually adopt them. But at some point, it became impossible for them to handle the traffic that was coming through from mobile phones for data, with people doing things as simple as instant messaging and then starting to share photos and all the other things we know we do. And that company became ultimately about a $2.8 billion exit for us, and is now part of Cisco and is a part of all the infrastructure. But if you had looked at that as anything other than a big problem and had thought about it as anything other than a $1 billion market opportunity or multi-billion dollar market opportunity, you would have missed the investment. If you'd thought about it as something that you will have to get a product out in 6 weeks and 3 sprints, and the minimum viable product is going to be that we can show we can move a bit through the network, you would never have made any money in that business. So we are, I think, in this industry, often hearing about how startups should just get something to market quickly. We're all in favor of that. That's great. There's some great literature around it. I'm sure some of you have read Reese's book on lean startups. That's a great way to go for certain things like consumer products. We happen to focus on the other end of it, mainly what we would describe as game changers. And we ultimately think that there's 2 other things that I've given you a sense of here that should be there. Not just big markets, but strong IP protection, so David's given you a sense of that, and compelling economics in the business model. So I'll give you some examples of that when we come to the business model session too. Okay, last part of the session before you get going. How do you evaluate your value proposition? How do you make sure that when you put it together, it's actually something compelling? I'm going to give you a simple formula. And I'm a big believer that if you can't measure something, you can't manage it. So this formula is simple. It's gain pain. And I'm going to describe it to you as simply as it sounds. It's to measure the gain you deliver the customer versus the pain and the cost the customer goes through to adopt it. What pain, you might say? Trust me, large enterprises in particular always have pain associated with adopting anything. It turns out even we as consumers do. Changing our habits is a pain. But the point is, I'm going to give you this example in a way that certainly in the B2B world is very measurable. So what are the kinds of gains you should be looking for? There's some obvious ones here. We've talked a lot about them tonight. Revenue that you can give your customers, you can help them drive their revenue up. Cost savings you might be able to bring to them. Those are the 2 most obvious ones. Less measurable sometimes is the time you might save them, but in the business process I was describing earlier for AT&T that Active Endpoints is running, we took the process down from what was minutes to seconds. Well, that makes a big difference when you've got a customer holding on the line from thousands of miles away trying to get their account working. And so time is important. People are also important. If you can reduce, obviously, the labor involved in things, that's critical. But this is where it gets a little more obtuse, and it's where I'd actually spend a bit of time. It turns out that a lot of times, for those of you who've read Jeffrey Moore's book, you'll understand this word. A lot of times in the early market, you have visionaries and early adopters. And these are the people who are looking for a breakthrough in something. And they're the people who are most likely to adopt it. And these are people like me, frankly. They're the geeks who always buy the latest shiny gadget. I've got a whole drawer for them. And it's typically people like the visionaries who can see what a breakthrough might represent that buy the first products in a marketplace. They actually don't care about any of the things I just mentioned. What they care about is something that's just genuinely new and different and is a breakthrough. And in the early markets, that's what you're looking for, is something that gives them a competitive advantage, something that makes them feel like either they're the coolest kid on the block because they've got the latest gadget and they can do something that's gee whiz, Or in the enterprise world, it's something more fundamental, that they can actually go out and compete for a customer segment that they just couldn't have competed for before because they've got some new, faster database that enables them to serve their customers much quicker. And we have an example from Akiban, which, again, David, if you don't mind me sharing the example, which is a dating site, since we've talked about it. Who's one of your customers or potential customers. You don't have to reveal their name if you don't want to. So what was the competitive advantage that we're giving them? Because I know that when people come online, how they connect is very, very sensitive.
Well, again, there's a couple of things that happened there. One was that they had a big performance issue. It was taking them, on average, 4 seconds to run a query. Again, in web time, that's just deadly. They have 4 million subscribers on this platform, and they couldn't scale it. So we brought that right down to 25 milliseconds, so it's really, really fast. But now what we can do is that there's all kinds of new searches that they can do. There's all kinds of new information. I won't get into all the dirty details of it, but all kinds of things and questions that you can ask around the people that you want to date that they can serve up in a way that they couldn't before. And they've now been able to add in geographical, geospatial searches on that as well. So it's a competitive advantage.
So I was in the board meeting when they came to pitch, and I was struck by the guy walking out the room saying basically, look, we are going to be able to offer some services for dating that will help people find each other much faster, much closer to where they are, and much more like them. And that's a competitive advantage in the dating world. That's going to give you customers that other people won't get. So in the early market, that's probably the most important gain you're going to give people. And I would encourage you to spend a lot of time trying to understand why it's a breakout in that regard. Then there are some softer things, but I put them up here just so you think about them. Reputation might be an example. Obviously, we talked about customer service. If you can improve your customer service and your engagement with your customers, it could improve your reputation. That could be valuable. Whatever they are, there should be a list of these things. And when you get to your exercise tonight, think about listing these things first. These are all the things that are the good news. The bad news is there's always pain associated with implementing these things. The first one I'll bet you never think of, but it turns out to be probably one of the most expensive ones for startups. So this falls into the category, I wish somebody told me this 30 years ago when I was starting my first company. And that is the pain of finding you. Think about it for a second. You're a completely new company, unknown. You don't have a business card that carries IBM or Apple or whatever it is that, Facebook. You're now trying to find your first customers. They've also got to find you. How the earth do they figure that out? It's a very painful thing sometimes. If they have to spend a lot of time finding you, or you have to spend a lot of time finding them, that's an expensive thing to do. So finding out, finding an approach to reducing that is a big part of what we're going to talk about in the go-to-market session here. The next thing is trialing you. Imagine if what you had to do was go through weeks and weeks of evaluating your cell phone before you bought it. I mean, you're not going to do that. You walk in a store, you turn it on, you click a few buttons, and you figure out, does this work or doesn't it? Does it feel intuitive or not? That's the consumer world. Well, in the enterprise world, it's a lot more complex than that. People put you through things like performance testing, scalability, assurance for things like security, etc. So there's pain associated with all of that. If you can figure out how to package your product so that you can literally try it in, hopefully minutes, but hours or days, but not weeks or months, you're going to reduce the pain for the customer. Now we have another great example from our case study tonight at Aperion. So I don't know whether Alan, you or Sim, or actually maybe I haven't had you talk, Carlos. Why don't you talk to this? How long did it take us when we first launched the Enterprise App Store and our first products for a customer to trial it?
It could take up to days because it was with Apple. There were some issues about signing certificates. The customer had to go to Apple directly. Then it's a matter of certainly hours and sometimes just days. If nothing else for the process, just finding the right people who have the right information in the customer.
And what was the result of that?
It just delays trials. It's not something where you may end up you can lose interest. You can be focused. The process can be too complicated. I mean, it's just something that just doesn't get people moving. And the intention, which is to get them to try something, is getting lost in the difficulty of actually getting them to just get it installed.
So as the investor, Carlos runs engineering. As the investor and the guy who's thinking about the numbers, I'll give you the exact answer to that. Our conversion ratio was half, less than actually, what it is now.
Yes.
What have we done? What have we changed? And how long is the trial process now?
So what we've done is actually put together besides the native Apple, which is still good because it has its advantages, we have an HTML5 version of the Enterprise App Store, which essentially somebody can go now into the website, fill a very small registration with minimal information, and then they can download the HTML app catalog. They can actually sign as an administrator, and within less than 5 minutes, 5 o'clock, they can actually set an administrative account, set up users, and set applications and get running. Less than 5 minutes, they're on, and with a fully virtual product.
Thank you, Carlos. So I give this team huge credit because as a board, we were watching this conversion ratio. We knew it was too high. We knew it was delaying things. And we set a goal, or I should say the team set a goal, of being what they called live in 5, which is getting a customer live in 5 minutes or less. And they've actually achieved it. They now call that, they market it as instant on. So you can instantly go and sign on and create an app store. And at the board meeting the other day, I heard a great story since it's, any Celtics fans here? No sports fans? Or at least one. Okay, good. Well, it turns out the Celtics have adopted iPads for the one person in the room that cares. I care too. And they're using them as playbooks to help people on the court in real time, work through new plays and stuff and record things. Well, with all the people that were adopting the iPads, it was difficult to get the apps out there quickly, keep them up to date, distribute the new plays on time. They rang up Aperion. They put up an app store in less than 2 hours, and they bought and were done, and they distributed their new apps and their playbooks in 2 hours. That was a 2-hour sales cycle. There's no way that would have happened before. It would have taken us 2 weeks to get through the evaluation. That's why this stuff matters. So you've got to think about those things. The buy piece, I just gave you, a good enough case study for you to figure this out. If it takes people a lot of time to go through an actual purchase, you've obviously got to think about that in a more fundamental way in large enterprises. Things that are probably over $5,000 can't go on a credit card. Over $50,000, you're pretty sure it's going to go to a second sign-off. Over $500,000, you're pretty sure it's now in a process. Over $1 million, you're in procurement, you're dealing with lawyers. And so pricing can play a big part in this. So people always find ways, and again, we'll talk about this in go-to-market more, of packaging so that people can buy easily. But you want to reduce the pain of that. Implementation, we just gave an example about it. If it takes a long time, it's going to delay you. And deployment, same thing. So think about all those things when you're building your gain-pain equation. But then there's the one last piece, which very few people ever think of. And this is unique to startups. Not entirely, but there's a piece in the middle that is unfortunately very important, even though it's boring. And that is the default is do nothing. And unfortunately, that's almost invariably the greatest competitor for a startup. Because if you've got their attention, they're thinking about, well, okay, it's a startup. And that means I'm probably taking some kind of risk. And so I'm not sure I really want to do that. Guess what? I'll just do nothing. And that happens probably more than you can possibly imagine as the biggest cause of problems for startups. So you've got to think about this. Now, if they've already got a solution, they're also going to be thinking about switching costs. That's why I said to you, try and find something that's underserved where there isn't a solution. There's already an alternative and they're already using something. Then they've got to take that out. That costs money, retraining people, changing business processes, etc. So that's why I've always emphasized, come up with something that's unique that hasn't been done before. That makes such a difference. And then good enough is good enough. And unfortunately, and thank you to the earlier point that was raised here, good enough is often do it yourself, which is, okay, well, we think we can find a way to do this. We'll build our own app store. And how many times have we heard that?
Actually, quite a few, and even some people tried it first and then realized it doesn't work.
What's a good customer example of that? Was Estee in one of those examples?
The first customer actually was.
Can you stand up and just project? Sorry.
So the first customer was actually a company that's involved in biotherapeutics, and they had a couple of apps they built, and they were very empowering for the sales force, and they figured they would build their own. And they tried to send out emails and with 10 different steps and explaining it to people. And if you've ever dealt with salespeople, I'll just make fun of them because they will not follow your directions, basically. So they needed something that was going to work, and they had very little take-up. They like 10% of the people actually followed the directions. So when they came to us, we were actually like Akiba. We were actually pre-release at that point. They were a beta tester, and they said, "Can we launch this? Can we roll this out?" And we were able to actually solve that problem because they considered that a critical. They were on the edge of the precipice.
So it turns out they came back and bought right afterwards. But the first thing they did was build it themselves. And you're going to find that a lot in technology sales. People will just try to find some alternative or they'll do it themselves. So thanks to somebody for raising that. My favorite and last point on this is something that, again, David at Akiban is ideally suited to answer, which is, how could you imagine doing something highly disruptive, but that is non-disruptive to actually adopt? So, David, while you think about the answer to why are you in that position, I know you know it. That was a setup. Okay, I admit it. It turns out that there are lots of things you can do that are disruptive. It's very tough to find something that's highly discontinuous and disruptive, but is really easy for people to change, to adopt. An example in a very technical world, for those of you who follow the big shift that's happening in the sort of technology world today, is everything's going cloud, and you probably know it even because if you have an iPhone, you're hearing Apple even use iCloud. Well, it turns out cloud is enabled by something that was a discontinuous innovation called virtualization. It made it possible for people to run all sorts of different capabilities on single machines, so it got them much more efficient. And it also made it possible for people to scale those machines horizontally, for those of you who are technical in the audience. So virtualization was an exact example of a very disruptive innovation. It took efficiency on server from being in the low teens to being in the high, in many cases, 80, 90%. People could load it up if they wanted to, even more than that. So it sometimes quintupled efficiencies or more on the server, and it made it possible for people to get compute at a much lower cost and offer it as a utility the way, for example, people like Amazon and Apple are now doing. But the great thing about virtualization, and the reason it really took off, is because you didn't have to change anything. If you were running whatever it was, some HR application that was doing all your benefits, and you were deciding you wanted to take advantage of virtualization, all you did was you put that software in a virtual container, and you ran more and more and more of them on the same machine, five more processes of it. Didn't change anything in the software at all. So it was a very disruptive innovation in the impact it had, but it was non-disruptive to adopt. And if you can find things in your value prop that work that way, they're going to be much easier for customers to approach. So can you explain why Akiban falls into that category?
Yeah, again, so the actual innovation itself it's a complete relational database. It's totally new. The storage infrastructure is completely different. The way in which we execute the queries is completely different. Everything is different, and that's how we realize those gains. But you access it through standard ANSI SQL, through standard SQL. There's no change in the SQL construct, and you can plug in to your existing database implementation using replication. These are standard techniques. So in terms of actually deploying us, it's just a plug and play. Even though it's entirely disruptive architecture.
Do I have to change anything in my application is really the key?
Nothing, no, you don't have to rewrite anything in your application, you don't have to re-architect it, you don't have to change the way that you operate, you don't have to change any element of that.
And do I have to take my application down to start using it?
You do not. You plug straight in, we run and we warm up the replica, and then you start redirecting your problem queries to Akiban.
So that really caught my attention when we were looking at the way this innovation was going to be brought to market, because nobody wants to take their application down. If you're serving a dating site and you've got 40 million users, was it 40 million or 4 million? 4 million, I think. 4 million users. I'm sure they'll get to it with you. There we go. So 4 million users, you're not going to suddenly take them down and say, sorry, nobody can date for the next hour while we actually take our server down and put this new technology in. Not going to happen. So the brilliant thing that these guys did was not only did they not have to change their application, but they could plug this thing in alongside. It automatically started replicating the data and enabling people to get the advantage. That really caught my attention. That is very, very tough to do in that world. So again, think about how, when you're building a value prop, you could approach that. OK, I want to know how many people have figured out in the gain-pain ratio, what is the right ratio? How much gain do you have to overcome the pain? Is it greater than 1, greater than 2? Anybody, any ideas?
10 to 1.
10 to 1? Yeah. It turns out it really isn't worth bothering to come into a major marketplace and compete unless you've got at least 10 to 1. In other words, an order of magnitude breakthrough, at least. And it's preferable if you can say what David says, which is we start at 10 to 1, and we can take you up to 2 orders of magnitude, 100 to 1 performance improvement. Why is that? Well, because just to put it in the bluntest of senses, startups are a risk. Small companies are not easy for people to deal with, and there's a risk that whoever's going to bet on you is probably putting their job on the line to bring you in, unless you can find clever ways like David has to take the risk out of it so you can run things in parallel. But the point is, there's always this inertia, there's always this risk, there's always this pain to find, try, buy, implement you. And so you need at least an order of magnitude improvement in your gain-pain ratio to be in business. So I'm going to give you this as a handout. You don't need to write it all down. But this is what I want you to go off and do in the workshop is just list out what your idea is. Those 10 of you that stuck up your hand that are going to be team leaders. Come up with your own gain-pain ratio. Just write down what you think the benefits are. It's going to be obviously very rough, and the whole point is to get you thinking about it. If you're actually in the real world doing this, what this really represents is a great set of questions for you to go ask customers. And I find it amazing how many times entrepreneurs go out and they do their market research and they say, hey, would you buy this? It's a great question, but it doesn't address half of these things. And by the way, it's really easy for somebody to say yes, but then you say, well, will you pull out your checkbook and write the check? And they say no. Why is that? Probably because you didn't get this ratio right. And you'd be shocked how many times people do all this great market research, then they come to market and there are no buyers. And it's almost invariably because this ratio isn't worked through. So I encourage you to just do it all the other way around. Go and ask all these questions. Go ask your customer, are we really, if it's an early adopter, giving you some competitive advantage? What is the breakthrough you're going to get? How much money would this save you? How would you implement this? How much is that going to cost you? Who's going to own that? All those questions that are easy to avoid, but actually, if you can answer them up front, will really help you. Okay, so for my case study, I'd like to have, let's have Alan, you haven't had a chance to talk. The last slide, which is the example of this, Aperion, one of their key customers. Can you stand up and just give us an example of how your value prop played out, how your gain-pain ratio played out with one of your early customers?
Yeah. So people are familiar with the Clinique brand? Yeah. Yeah. So if you go in...
The men aren't supposed to answer that.
Yeah. Okay. If you go into a Clinique counter these days, they're trying to hit 17,000 worldwide. They're about halfway through that rollout right now. You'll see an iPad in a nice white shiny case, and it's got this screenshot actually. And we built this application for them, as well as the infrastructure on the back end to manage that application. You go up, you interact with the iPad, you answer a few questions. How old are you? How much sleep do you get? Are you under stress? Things like that. And the application will print out at the end a set of product recommendations. And you take that product recommendation up to the cashier and say, I'd like to buy these things. Where they've been rolled out, it's had an absolutely amazing impact on their business. First thing, revenue is up 40% at each of these counters. Now that's a huge game shifter for anybody. And the average ticket is up 300%. So people buy 3 times more when they interact with the iPad than they do when they interact with a clerk. So why is that? Well, there's a few reasons for it. For one, they probably don't like to tell the clerk how old they are or how much stress they're under, how much sleep they get. But they don't really mind telling that to the iPad. And the second thing is the iPad doesn't lie as far as they're concerned. So if it says you need this stuff, well, you need this stuff, right? So you go and you buy it. So this was such an innovation, and they've actually won an award in the industry called the L2. It's an L2 award they won for innovation, breakthrough thinking, and game changing inside of the industry by using this. And it's been phenomenal. The coolest part about it, at least from my nerdy perspective, is that all of these makeup counters, they don't have to have their IT people go out and touch them because there's actually no IT. These counters exist inside of Macy's. They're in duty-free shops in Charles de Gaulle Airport. They're all over the world where they don't have reach and infrastructure. And so we can manage a critical piece of their business and bring huge value to it, and they don't have to touch it. That just all happens.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks for the Aperion team for being here. They're all going to be available to help you with the workshop. And the beauty of this was it's a real customer, it's a real story. We took their revenue up, we also took their costs down. The net result is a big win-win for them. And you can measure it in terms of the $2.5 million that was saved, but probably much more important, we don't get their numbers, but the 40% uplift in revenue. So those are the kinds of value props, obviously, when you can bring them into focus, really make a difference. And by the way, if you were pitching me and you brought this value prop in, I'd be paying attention. It caught the attention of our investor in Silicon Valley, Kleiner Perkins, that jumped in on the back of this when they saw this. Okay, we're done. That was